When we reflect on the British invasion, our minds often linger in the 1960s, a decade dominated by the likes of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. However, the influence of British bands extended well beyond this era, resonating through the American music landscape until the late 1980s. While some might associate the surge of British music popularity in the 1970s with the Second British Invasion, it's important to distinguish that here, we refer to the NWOBHM, new wave of British heavy metal, in the early 1980s as the true Second British Invasion. It began with the Beatles and a host of others who propelled the British invasion of the 60s, leaving an indelible mark on the global music stage. But the momentum didn't stop there. The 70s heralded a new wave of exceptional British bands who followed suit. The decade of the 1970s buzzed with the emergence of power pop, a genre blending the raw energy of rock with the smooth appeal of pop. This new sound created fertile ground for British bands, who found it relatively easy to captivate the American record market. As we delve into the 1970s, we witness the formation of modern rock music, a legacy carried on by British bands from the sensational 60s. Let's find out together. The initial British invasion saw groups like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Who, the Animals, the Yardbirds, and Cream, overwhelming the American music scene with their groundbreaking sounds. The popularity of these British bands not only invigorated the US record market, but also ignited a creative explosion among American musicians. Bob Dylan pioneered folk rock, Jimi Hendrix shaped psychedelic rock, and stars like Janis Joplin and the Byrds quickly became mainstream fixtures. Among the essential contributors to American rock music were The Doors, a legendary psychedelic rock band from Los Angeles, whose prime spanned from 1967 to 1971. Rising to prominence during the tumultuous times of the Vietnam War, The Doors won over the youth with their somber, metaphorical lyrics, captivating vocals, and hypnotic melodies. Although the untimely death of frontman Jim Morrison in 1971 led to the band's dissolution, The Doors' profound impact on American rock history remains unforgettable. As the 1970s unfolded, the allure of British bands showed no signs of waning. Despite internal discord leading to the breakup of the Beatles, their influence lingered. Meanwhile, the Rolling Stones continued to captivate audiences with a string of masterpieces, sustaining their stature as rock icons. The 1970s heralded a new era in rock music, marked by the emergence of bands that would become legends in their own right. This new wave was characterized by the robust sounds of hard rock and the intricate compositions of progressive rock. Leading the charge in hard rock were bands like Queen, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath, each bringing their unique brand of powerhouse performances and electrifying riffs. On the progressive rock front, bands such as Pink Floyd, Yes, and King Crimson pushed musical boundaries, experimenting with complex structures and philosophical themes, shaping what would become a transformative era in rock music. Led Zeppelin, a name that echoes through the annals of rock history, transcending mere words. When discussing the seismic shifts in the rock music landscape of the 1970s, Led Zeppelin commands a central role, their influence undeniable, and their legacy profound. Formed in 1968 and active until 1980, Led Zeppelin was the brainchild of Jimmy Page guitar, a former member of the Yardbirds, a pivotal figure in the first British invasion. Bringing together virtuoso session musicians Robert Plant, vocals, John Bonham, drums, and John Paul Jones, bass, the band soared to iconic status. As one of the most revered rock acts globally, Led Zeppelin wielded unparalleled influence in popularizing hard rock and defining the heavy metal genre. Their musical repertoire traversed diverse genres, including hard rock, blues rock, progressive rock, folk rock, and beyond, incorporating elements of reggae, funk, samba, and even Indian music. Among the triumvirate of early heavy metal pioneers, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin stood out as the epitome of commercial success. Initially dubbed the New Yardbirds, a serendipitous jest between The Who's Keith Moon and John Entwistle birthed the name Led Zeppelin. What set Led Zeppelin apart was the unparalleled musical prowess of each member. From Jimmy Page's virtuosic guitar wizardry to John Bonham's thunderous drumming, they stood among the elite in their respective fields. Tragically, Led Zeppelin's journey came to an abrupt end in 1980, with the untimely death of drummer John Bonham, attributed to alcohol abuse. Yet, their legacy endures as an enduring testament to the power of rock and roll. Queen, a band that defied musical conventions and transcended genre boundaries, much like their contemporaries, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin. Their musical journey began with early albums rooted in hard rock and glam rock. However, Queen's creative curiosity led them to explore a vast array of musical styles, including soft rock, pop rock, progressive rock, and even disco. The iconic lineup solidified in 1971, featuring Brian May guitar, Roger Taylor drums, Freddie Mercury vocals, and John Deacon bass. Their unique blend of talent set the stage for a revolutionary sound that would captivate the world. Queen's mainstream breakthrough came with their debut album in 1973, but it was their fourth album, A Night at the Opera, released in 1975, that truly cemented their place in music history. This album features the epic Bohemian Rhapsody, a song that weaves together disparate musical genres, from a cappella and ballad to opera and hard rock, in a groundbreaking composition that tells the poignant tale of a condemned man. Bohemian Rhapsody became a monumental success, selling 6 million copies worldwide and ranking as the third best-selling single in British history. The song's storied creation and immense impact were later immortalized in the film Bohemian Rhapsody. Throughout the 1970s, Queen's popularity soared. However, the band faced a somber chapter, with the death of Freddie Mercury in 1991 due to AIDS, and John Deacon's departure in 1997. Despite these losses, Brian May and Roger Taylor continue to honor Queen's legacy, touring occasionally and keeping the spirit of Queen alive. Deep Purple, a cornerstone of hard rock and a monumental force in the evolution of heavy metal, began its musical journey in 1967 under the leadership of guitarist Ritchie Blackmore. With the addition of vocalist Ian Gillan, the band surged to widespread popularity. Their 1970 album, Deep Purple in Rock, is often hailed as a hard rock and heavy metal Bible, revolutionizing the genre with its unprecedented loud and high-output sound. A stark departure from the heavy rock norms of its time. The album's groundbreaking approach captured the imaginations of listeners across Europe and Asia, propelling Deep Purple to global stardom, with over 100 million records sold worldwide. Despite periods of disbandment and reunion, Deep Purple remains a vibrant entity in the music world today. On the darker side of rock, Black Sabbath crafted a sound that would come to define modern heavy metal. Led by Tony Iommi and Ozzy Osbourne, the band embraced a unique, stark, and unchanging sound that starkly contrasted with the genre-mixing efforts of Deep Purple and the experimental sounds of Led Zeppelin. Their seminal album, Paranoid, released shortly after their debut, remains a cornerstone in the annals of heavy metal. Although Osbourne would eventually part ways with the band, Black Sabbath's legacy as heavy metal pioneers is undisputed. Turning to the realm of progressive rock, Pink Floyd stands out not only as one of the best-selling bands of all time, but also as the genre's most successful exponent. Renowned for their musical excellence and philosophical lyrics, Pink Floyd's albums are celebrated as true works of art, seamlessly integrating social critique with their distinctive sound. Alongside Pink Floyd, bands like King Crimson, Yes, and Genesis are revered as the four pillars of progressive rock. Meanwhile, David Bowie introduced the world to glam rock, wielding an influence that spans the breadth of modern music and cements his status as one of its most transformative figures. Each of these artists and bands has left an indelible mark on the fabric of rock music, shaping its past and continuing to influence its future. The 1970s are often hailed as the golden age of rock music, a dynamic era that reshaped the American musical landscape. It was a time of significant change. The Beatles, the icons of the 60s, had disbanded, leading to accelerated genre fragmentation and a wave of excitement across the American music scene. Amidst this backdrop, Bruce Springsteen emerged as more than just a rock musician. He became a symbol of American pop culture itself. His album, Born to Run, is considered one of his greatest works, resonating powerfully with the American public and becoming a defining sound of the decade. Meanwhile, American rock bands like Aerosmith and Eagles made their mark, countering the prevailing British influence with their unique sounds. Soft rock found its champions in bands like Carpenters and Bread, each contributing to the genre's rise to mainstream popularity. The 1970s also witnessed the birth of funk and the heyday of disco, which began in earnest in 1974. The Bee Gees, synonymous with disco music, skyrocketed to global fame with their contributions to the soundtrack of the 1977 film Saturday Night Fever. Yet the British invasion was far from over. As the 1970s drew to a close, a new musical revolution was brewing. Punk rock burst onto the scene, spearheaded by bands like the Sex Pistols and The Clash. This raw, rebellious sound marked the beginning of what would be known as the Second British Invasion. The Second British Invasion began in earnest with the emergence of NWO BHM, new wave of British heavy metal, in the early 1980s.